Neil Coyle, the independent MP for Barnsley and Old Southwark, has had his whip restored to the Labour Party. If you don't know, Coyle was suspended last year. Reason being, he harassed and racially abused a journalist. The MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark had the whip removed last year following an incident in the Commons bar during which he was said to have made racist comments towards political journalist Henry Dyer. Dyer, who is British Chinese, said the MP had made xenophobic remarks which made him feel uncomfortable. Not only that, there's more. In March, Coyle was suspended from the Commons for 5 days. The MP was found to have breached the Commons harassment policy with drunken behaviour in its Strangers Bar last year. Coyle was found to have engaged in foul-mouthed and drunken abuse towards a junior parliamentary assistant employed by another MP. This very pleasant man has been welcomed back into Starmer's Labour. Now, when the EHRC report drops regarding Labour under Corbyn, this is what Starmer said: zero tolerance of anti-Semitism, of racism, of discrimination of any kind. Is this zero tolerance? In reality, it's zero tolerance of racism, but only on the left. So if you're Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, then that's the supposedly zero tolerance Starmer was talking about. But if you're Angela Smith, who called brown people a funny tinge live on TV, or if you're a drunken racist who got kicked out of the House of Commons, what? So I guess we'll be expecting Corbyn and Abbott to have their whip restored momentarily, right? Of course not. This is another cynical, disgusting move from Starmer. It's not about fighting racism, it's about getting your factional mates in and ridding the party of anything that resembles the left. But surely he can't expel Abbott. I mean, Starmer has the political capital to keep Corbyn out, but not Diane Abbott. Now, she hasn't been kicked out, she's still under suspension. But if her whip isn't restored, that means Starmer thinks that drunkenly harassing and abusing people to their face is more acceptable than comments which try to make an important point regarding the hierarchy of racism, just done, honestly, in a really shitty way. Now, you know me, I criticised her. I said suspension pending and investigation was the right thing, but a path to her being brought back in. Now, the circumstance with Abbott is that she was the first black woman MP who has stood against racism all her life and has been on the end of it her whole life too. This decision makes complete sense if you know Keir Starmer. When the Ford report dropped, Starmer ignored it. He didn't like the findings, and it found that anti-Semitism was weaponised, mostly from the right, that the right engaged in some pretty awful factionalism. Starmer didn't like that. It also found that there was a hierarchy of racism. Again, Starmer didn't like that either, because the report didn't say that Labour only has a problem with anti-Semitism and that is all of the fault of the left. Now, the Labour right don't like the idea of the hierarchy of racism. Why? Well, because it gives credit to the idea that since other forms of racism isn't treated as seriously as anti-Semitism, then it flies in the face that Labour under the left is specifically this horrible anti-Semitic clique. Proving that anti-Semitism has had more of a focus than other forms of racism dispels the myth that Labour was a hotbed of the most grotesque anti-Semitism in the country, but rather it may have failed on anti-Semitism just like any other form of racism in other parties. And that's true. Every party, every organisation, and every business in the world has issues with racism. Not just anti-Semitism, but anti-blackness, Islamophobia, issues with Gypsy Roma travellers. So it gives weight to those on the left who say, hey, yes, anti-Semitism did exist in Labour. Yes, some of it existed on the left, but it's not this hotbed where it's threatened the way of Jewish life. No, it failed in some areas, and Labour continues to fail with racism today. Oh, and that includes anti-Semitism, because we know it's a load of crap that is suddenly gone away now Corbyn is out. So then this gives weight to factionalism. So what did the Labour right do? Do they admit there is a real issue with anti-blackness in the party? And as the Ford report showed, a lot of it came from the right, which gives credit to the idea that factionalism did play a role. Or do they double down, say generic words like, yeah, we take it seriously, we take anti-blackness seriously, but in reality, they tried to kick out Diane Abbott whilst letting Coyle and Smith in, thus continuing the factional warfare against the left. In that context, you can see exactly why Coyle was allowed in. It wasn't just some rash decision because Starmer and the right wanted more of their factional mates in. I mean, that is true, but it's a lot more cynical than that. They certainly would have thought a lot about this, and they certainly would have known how it would have looked to readmit a racist white guy at the same time as having suspended Diane Abbott, and after thinking about it for a long time, they thought, yeah, let's do it. Well, Coyle said sorry, he was investigated by independent panels, I've changed, blah, blah, blah. Starmer can't use the defence of procedure because when Corbyn was suspended, he went through the proper procedure of investigation by the NEC. They found he didn't do anything wrong and was readmitted to the Labour membership. But no, Starmer bypassed that. He got involved directly and personally removed the whip. So much for a rules-based technocratic politician. You can't even trust Mr. Briefcase to be a man of procedure. He will break any rules he likes to get his way. That's because Starmer is an absolute danger and Labour under him is a hotbed of racism.